All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today for our webinar. We're just going to give folks a couple more minutes to filter in before we begin. All right. And again, hello, everybody. Thank you for your patience. Today, NFI Solutions is joined by two great speakers from Evergreen. I want to introduce James Camper. He's a partner with Evergreen Settlements. He also goes by Jim. And we also have Robert Stolak, an Evergreen agent and owner of Senior Circuit Group LLC. He also goes by Bob. They will be looping you in on how you can put money back into the hands of policy owners who may be looking to discontinue their life insurance payments. And before we begin, a few house cleaning items. First, this is a recorded webinar. If you would like a copy of this recording, please reach out to us at 952-887-1239 or email us at marketing@nfisolutions.com. This information is also available as a handout in the chat tab, which will be typically on your right next to there's your chat, Q&A, polls, handout. That'll be right in the handout. And second, there will be a Q&A after the presentation. Please use the Q&A tab on the chat panel to ask any questions you may have. We will address them once the presentation is complete. And alrighty, Jim, Bob, take it away.
Thank you, Selena. Appreciate it. Thank you for the kind introduction there. Also want to thank NFI Solutions and Bob Stolak for being on the line with us today. In terms of our session today, we're going to break this down into two 20-minute segments. I will go through the slideshow and webinar, and then I'm going to pass it to Robert to give you some valuable information about some marketing tools that he has developed for you. And again, I want to thank everybody who's joined us today to learn more about the life settlement marketplace. For starters, I believe the next 40 minutes are going to be the most impactful 40 minutes of your year. This is a rapidly growing marketplace with an aging population. And what we're seeing every day is advertisements run on television, on radio, banner ads on your internet feed that are targeting seniors. And the message remains the same. It's if you're over the age of 65 and you have a life insurance policy that you no longer want or need or can afford, you may be able to sell it. And those direct buyers are looking for opportunities for your clients to sell their policies and circumvent you, right? What they're looking to do is acquire the asset for the least amount of money that they possibly can. This is critically important because this transaction is a sophisticated and complex transaction. There's no Zillow for life insurance policies. So your clients can't just go to the internet, put in their information, and understand whether or not they're getting a fair offer if they respond to one of those ads that they see on television. And more importantly, if they do respond and they do sell their policy without you and without an advocate, they may very well be making the biggest financial mistake of their life. And so with that, we're going to go through this presentation, and I have three goals. One is to ensure that you don't miss an opportunity to help a client in need, an opportunity to be the best advisor that you can be. Number two, I want to share what you need to be prepared to look for and how to transact in this marketplace. And then number three, I want to help you to avoid allowing a client or prospect to make that mistake that we just referenced. And so let's get started. The first slide here, we're talking about finding cases. Who will qualify? Typically, we are talking about individuals that are over the age of 65. In the last 10 years, the criteria set for what buyers will acquire has changed dramatically. And so 10 years ago, they may have been looking for life expectancies of 12 years or less. But in today's market, with large institutional capital coming in a very robust marketplace, buyers are willing to buy out to life expectancies as long as 20 years, and in some instances, even a little bit longer than that. So term conversion cases, probably one of the best areas to focus on if you're an advisor. You wrote insurance on somebody, or you have a client that purchased a term policy from a different advisor years ago, and they're coming up on the conversion privilege expiring. Those individuals, every single one of them, if they're over the age of 60 or 65, we should be having a conversation to see if they're a candidate. And if so, it could be a very lucrative transaction for you as the agent converting the policy from term to permanent. The majority of cases that we see do involve an insured that has experienced at least some decline in their health. What this means is if they bought the policy and they were preferred, 10 or 15 years ago, and today they're no longer preferred, maybe they had a cardiac event or a cancer event, or diabetes is part of their current health situation. That change in health or that decline in health is what's really creating the value for the buyer and for the seller. An area that I will focus on later is the 1035 declines, or when a client contacts you and suggests that they may want to reduce the face amount. So often this is happening because they can't afford the existing policy. The policy has outlived its original purpose, or they didn't fund it appropriately. And so now they're faced with making some decisions about what to do. Those situations, specifically a 1035 decline, they're being declined for a reason, right? They're being declined because their health is not as good as it could be or should be in order to get the new insurance. And so that should be a flag that is thrown up immediately, that you would want to look at that potential case for a life settlement. Be proactive. The last bullet point here is probably one of the most important that you're going to see. As the trusted advisor, don't allow your client to act without you. And that means that if they're looking at these advertisements that run 24/7 on TV and the internet, you are going to have to be proactive. You're going to have to get in front of those clients, figure out the best approach. Bob and I have different methods to assist you in how to approach the client, but you want your clients to know that you offer them representation and you are their advocate when it comes to helping them sell their policy in a life settlement transaction. The MVP, which is our market value projection, is a tool that we developed to empower advisors. And what we have here with this particular slide is showing you different life expectancy assumptions that we will make. And with a current or recent illustration and a date of birth, we're able to run that through our proprietary pricing model and generate this market value projection for you. We can provide it to you in a PDF document, or we can just have a dialogue about where we see the value given the circumstances. So again, this is designed to help you as the advisor manage the expectations of your clients, right? We can do this at the onset of the process so that you are now having a dialogue with a 75-year-old client who says, Mr. and Mrs. Advisor, I'm in great health. I'm 75. Can I sell my policy? The natural next question, if you say yes, you could be a candidate, is for how much, right? They want to know exactly what to expect if they can sell their policy. And so we're here to support you and provide you and empower you with that information. And that's what the market value projection does for you. So identifying financial situations, and really this is what to keep top of mind. As an advisor, I myself, in terms of my background, I was a retail advisor for a number of years before I entered the wholesale marketplace and ended up becoming a partner here at Evergreen Settlements. And I will tell you, day to day, we get bogged down with what's on our desk, right? It's XYZ client at 11 a.m., at 1 p.m., we have a different client in a different situation we're looking at. So what you need to be aware of so that you don't miss an opportunity is what type of circumstances will lead to a life settlement transaction. There are 4 different categories that we break this down into for the slides and for the presentation. The first is the need for liquidity. The number one reason someone sells a life insurance policy is they need liquidity. They can no longer afford the policy. That could be a situation where a retiree was working and they're in their 70s and no longer have the income because they've been forced to retire due to a health change or a health event. We know that in today's world, we have a growing debt situation. I would argue that it's not just a situation, but a crisis. We have more debt on consumers today than we ever have in the past in the United States. And so if somebody is burdened with debt and they're paying for their own or a portion of their own aging at home or their healthcare expenses, selling a life insurance policy may provide them with the liquidity they need in order to stay at home and age at home and not have to go to a nursing facility to supplement a retirement. It's not uncommon that we see individuals get into the retirement years and they just want to feel a little bit more comfortable about their financial situation. And one of those assets that they will consider for sale is the life insurance policy in a life settlement transaction. Policy changes. It's no secret we've been in historical low interest rate environment for the last 15, 20 years. And so many policies have simply underperformed, right? If you sold the insurance policy and it was universal life back in 2004, and the interest rate at that time was higher than it is today and what it's been for the last 20 years, well, that policy likely underperformed unless the client increased their premiums. And I can tell you, living in the world I live in, where I look at hundreds, if not thousands of policies every 6 months, so many clients simply have not increased their life insurance premium. They've just funded it the way it was illustrated at the beginning, or in many situations, they've stopped funding it altogether, right? So these are situations where you should be aware of them, be mindful of where the client's needs may lie, and be proactive. Get in front of your clients and ask them these questions. Health considerations. It's no secret that medical bills are on the rise. We live in an inflationary environment right now. Long-term care expenses are through the roof. And if you want to age in place, you're going to have the financial wherewithal to stay at home and pay for traveling nurses or aides to come in and care for you. And once again, selling a life insurance policy may help fund these necessities. And the last one, which could be a very lucrative area, is business developments. So when a business is sold and there's a key man policy or a buy-sell agreement in place, that insurance policy is no longer needed. What are they going to do with that policy? If there's a need for cash flow, perhaps in an effort to avoid a bankruptcy, right? A business went through the pandemic, the model has changed. Perhaps they're not having the same success they were having before the pandemic. They're not quite in bankruptcy yet, but they're looking at ways to increase their balance sheet, right? Increase the cash on hand in order to fund their operations. Well, one way to do that might be to sell the life insurance policy on the matriarch or a key executive. And then the last one there is bankruptcy. It is not uncommon that we see cases from bankruptcy attorneys or receivers, or in many cases, the individual who is unfortunately faced with bankruptcy, and they're looking at ways that they may be able to raise some capital and exit the bankruptcy situation, or again avoid it if they're facing it and it's imminent. Sticking with that theme, what types of policies do we see? Well, any type of policy can be sold. I mentioned convertible term insurance, but even if a term policy is not convertible and it's beyond the term conversion period, they can still be sold if the insured has enough health issues, right? So GUL is guaranteed universal life, and these policies are extremely attractive to institutional investors because they know if they pay that premium on time, they're going to collect the death benefit. In situations where one of your clients owns a GUL product, they generally do not need to be impaired. If they were issued best class, preferred best on the policy, they may very well be able to sell that policy, even if they're still in the same health as when they bought it. Now, we know that needs change, right? So the client may have bought that GUL 3, 5, 10 years ago, And at this point, they no longer can afford it or no longer need it. Perhaps a beneficiary predeceased or there was a divorce. Whatever the circumstances may be, it's important to recognize that GUL is a very, very attractive target as an advisor to look for. Impaired lives, as I noted at the onset, most of the cases that we handle do involve insureds that have had some decline in health. I think what's probably pretty obvious is the more significant the decline in health is, and the more cost efficient the policy is, the greater the value will be to that policy in the secondary market. Policy changes, we mentioned before, the 1035 exchanges. There have been, over the last 20 years, a number of buyers that will offer RDB. And RDB stands for Retained Death Benefit. So where clients actually still have a need or a desire to maintain life insurance, but they can no longer buy new insurance and they can no longer afford their existing insurance, retained death benefit may be a very critical and important solution for them. And so what happens in a retained death benefit transaction is the buyer, in lieu of cash or in conjunction with a lesser cash component, will come in and take over all future premium payments on the existing policy. And they will allow the seller to name a beneficiary that typically is irrevocable at the insurance company level. And so, for example, if we have $1 million death benefit and the retained death benefit offer is $300,000, the beneficiary is going to typically be the spouse of the insured, a child, or perhaps a trust that's going to be named at the insurance company to receive $300,000 of the $1 million death benefit when the claim is paid. COI increases or proposed increase, we know just about every insurance company has gone through this over the last 20 years. And so if one of your clients owns a policy from one of these carriers, it may be, a good time to look at getting a policy review done and having us shop the policy to determine whether or not they have an exit strategy, as those increased costs of maintaining the contracts may be cost prohibitive. I mentioned here Lincoln National Life enhanced cash surrender value. A few insurance companies over the last couple of years came out with what they're calling enhanced cash surrender values. And we have seen that in better than 90% of those cases, we can provide that seller or that policy owner with a better solution than the insurance company will. And if you think about it, what Lincoln's doing is they're looking to remove that contract from their books, right? If they can convince somebody to surrender the contract, I'm sure they're willing to give them some sort of enhancement on the cash surrender value, because most of these contracts are going to be guaranteed universal life, and they have reserve requirements that they have to meet on those GUL type of product designs. And so what you need to know is if one of your clients receives a letter from their insurance company offering them an enhanced cash surrender value, that they are most likely going to be a candidate for a life settlement, and the life settlement is likely to provide them with a great deal of benefit in excess of what the insurance company is willing to pay them. We mentioned already key man retiring is an area for opportunity, the bankruptcy avoidance, and then certainly large term cases. In a few minutes, I'm going to touch on a large term case that came out of a business owned situation. So I think the decision is pretty easy, right? When given the choice between surrendering or selling a policy, a client should always consider selling if the value exceeds the cash surrender value here. Almost 90% of insurance policies don't pay a death claim. And so what we know is on average, 500,000 policies a year on seniors, that's individuals over the age of 65, are being lapsed or surrendered. That's 500,000 policies per year. And it's estimated that the death benefit for those 500,000 totals in excess of $120 billion. What this means is there's a massive opportunity to educate the consumer and for you as an advisor to play the role of a fiduciary, get in front of those clients and let them know that there's an opportunity here to help them recognize greater value than just the surrender value, or possibly if it's a term policy, a greater value than zero. Most attractive policies are over $250,000 a death benefit. And in 2022, the average policy size of a case that was purchased was 1.33 million. Now, it's important to understand that the market continues to evolve, and we're seeing more and more policies that are under $1 million. And in part, it's because the education that's happening through the advertising, right? Consumers are now more aware of it. So they're reaching out to their advisor and saying, hey, can I sell my policy? But what's important for you to understand is if a client meets the criteria, we should have a conversation. And your point of contact will be Bob Stolak, who I'm going to pass the presentation to in just a few minutes. An educated customer is critical. And what we find is in situations where, just like selling your real estate, if you got a call today from a solicitor and they said, Mr. Smith, you can sell your home right now for cash for $100,000. Do you think that that would be the best offer you would receive? Or do you think that getting multiple bids from multiple interested buyers would drive that value higher? I think we all know that the more interest there is in your real estate, the higher the bids are going to go and the more value that you're going to see. And the same thing holds true with life insurance policies. I used Homer Simpson here because you don't want to be that advisor running around on fire after a client already sells a policy and doesn't consult you. Just, again, be proactive, okay? This is the term example I wanted to share with you. $10 million policy. This was business owned, 69-year-old, in average health with a 19-year life expectancy or thereabouts. And since term insurance, it was still convertible at age 69 and had a surrender value of 0. In this situation, the target premium for the conversion was $323,000. Now, the advisor who converted this received his payout at somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 or 70% on that target premium. Now, the buyer agreed to pay that full target in the first year. Okay, and that's part of the process of negotiation on my part. And so the outcome here was an enormous success. The client received $350,000 on the settlement. The advisor received somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 and change on the conversion from term to permanent. That's a true win-win outcome. Second case is something that I think you're going to see much more often. This is $1 million face on a 74-year-old who was in average health. She had a cancer event that was in remission. And in this particular situation, she actually went to a direct buyer. She called them off of a TV ad. And initially, the offer was somewhere around $100,000. That's $100,000. Through our process and our proprietary auction, we received 27 offers for her policy and ended at a $315,000 life settlement. So that just kind of demonstrates the power of being in a position to, work with an expert who can maximize the value for you and for your client. I'm going to jump through because I know I only have a few more minutes before I pass this to Bob. Tax implications. So the IRS now has very clear tax guidance in terms of how you calculate a gain. And so the cost basis is generally going to be defined as the total premiums paid into a policy. Now, if you have a permanent policy and the cash surrender value exceeds the cost basis and you sell the policy for something greater than cash surrender value, you're going to have two different applications to taxation. You would have ordinary income from the cost basis up to the cash surrender value. Again, this assumes surrender value exceeds the cost basis, which is somewhat rare, but you would still have ordinary income on that component just as if they had surrendered the policy. Now, everything they receive in excess of the surrender value then would be capital gains. And so long as the policy owner has not changed in the last 366 days, it would be long-term capital gains treatment. Now, I will tell you, in better than 97% of the cases that we see, the tax application is a little different. The cash surrender value is less than the premiums paid. And therefore, the entirety of the settlement is going to be a capital gain. And again, if they owned it for the last 366 days in the same ownership structure, it would be long-term capital gain. I want to go through a quick compensation example with you, just so you understand how you're getting paid, right? Where's the benefit to you financially? And so in my example, we have a $500,000 policy. The cash surrender value was $10,000. Our final gross offer is $100,000. The maximum total compensation is the lesser of two calculations: a third of the gross offer, not to exceed 10% of face. Again, one third of the gross, not to exceed 10%. And so in this example, one third of the gross is $33,333. 10% of the face amount is $50,000. So $33,333 is the amount of maximum compensation. 40% of that is paid to the advisor. And you'd say, well, why is it only 40%? Well, we are going to, as the broker, absorb all of the expenses associated with brokering the case, which means procurement of medical records. It means buying life expectancy reports from third-party life expectancy providers and any other costs associated with the closing. Another way to do this, and I think it's very important to emphasize that early on in the transaction, you want to be having the conversation with the client about how you're compensated, because in 95% of the transactions, compensation disclosure is going to be required. And that means the seller is going to see how much we are earning in the closing package. And so you never want to get into a situation where we go down this path of securing offers and you get to the table of closing and the client sees the amount of compensation and balks at it, and then they go somewhere else. So I strongly encourage you to have the conversation up front. Be forthcoming. Make sure they understand that this works like any other contingent fee agreement. We're going to invest time and money in their case with no guarantee that they sell. They're under no obligation to sell a policy. And so in doing so, we're going to receive, again, up to one third of the compensation. A different way to calculate that is in terms of value created. In my same example, a $500,000 policy, $10,000 surrender value, $100,000 offer, the value being created is the amount over the surrender value, which is $90,000. So in this example, you could tell the client that the way that you're calculating the compensation, or the way that we are as the broker, is as a percentage of the value we're creating, or a third of the value we're creating, which is $30,000, not $33,000. This might be a little bit more palatable to a client because they see it in a sense that you're getting a third of every dollar you're procuring for them, or that we are procuring for them in the settlement, right? Interests are perfectly aligned there. The process is pretty straightforward. You take an application, you end up submitting it. We end up going out and procuring medical records. In many situations, we're going to ask you for a copy of the policy, an annual statement, possibly a premium history. We then go to market with our proprietary auction. When we come back and we let you know what the offers are, and if the offer is acceptable to the client, we go to closing. The entirety of the process takes somewhere around 8 to 12 weeks on average, but it can vary. In certain situations, it might run longer. In other situations, we might be able to get to a closing table much quicker. It just depends on the case and the specifics of the case. And so with this, I'm going to pass the mic to Robert Stolak, or Bob Stolak, who is my partner and also an expert in the area of life settlements. He's developed some exciting solutions for you when it comes to marketing. Bob, the floor is yours, my friend.
Well, thank you, Jim. You certainly gave a lot of information out there, and I hope it answered some questions that some of the agents have. I come to you as an agent myself. Okay, I have an agency in Boca Raton, Florida, the Senior Circuit Group, which I'm the president of. And I got involved in the life settlement world about a year and a half ago. I've been doing business in the insurance world for 28 years, going to be 28 years. And I had a client of mine. Here's the way I came into this. I think this story will sort of sum it up, and I think it'll also answer a lot of questions out there of how you get started, how you do this. So I had a client of mine who was a retired attorney. I sold him two GUL policies when he was 72 years old, that totaled $1.5 million worth of death benefit. 7 years later, he was working at the time. 7 years later, he retired, and he was having trouble making the premium payments, which were $46,000 a year. So we looked at the options. What could we do? Well, we could, probably reduce the part of the death benefit. We could look at a life settlement, although I wasn't well versed in it at the time. He was considering just letting the policy lapse and drop. Well, the cash surrender value in the policy was zero. So that wasn't a great option. And so we looked at the other avenues. So the one avenue that we did look at was a life settlement. And I went to an associate of mine that I knew from another business relationship, and he was very, very successful in this business. And I gave him the scenario on this client, and he came back and said, "No, it's not a deal. We can't get an offer for him. He's too healthy." So the client was kind of upset, and he wrote even a more very descriptive outlay of his medical situation, and gave it back to him. They went to their underwriter, came back, no deal. Okay. So then I went to another life settlement brokerage, okay, who took it. They thought they were able to get a deal for him, and it was very slow walked. I wasn't kept aware of what was going on with the situation, how, weeks were going by. I wasn't hearing back from them. Didn't know, how this was, working out. At the same time, I received a letter from Evergreen, just a blast letter that they send out to the agents. And they said in the letter that they were looking for GUL policies. They had buyers, and they didn't even have to necessarily qualify medically. So I said, well, you know what? I have to give a call. I want to be able to get an offer for my client, and also I want to get the best offer. So I gave a call, and Jordan Sykin, who's the vice president of the company there, took the reins of this deal. He within it seemed like days, but probably was about a week and a half or so, he had everything he needed on the case. He had medical records. He had a very good idea of where this was going to land, as far as offer. And off we went. And I saw these offers came in. There must have been somewhere 7, 8, maybe more different offers coming in on this policy. As we were doing this, that original life settlement broker, the one that was sort of slow walking it through, came back with an offer of $50,000 for this policy, $1.5 million policy. At that point there, we were already up to $458,000 as a gross offer for the client, which the client wanted to accept. Jordan had said, and this is what really took me over the top with Evergreen to really give it a good look. Not only did they do everything they say they were going to do, and they came through, and they have this system, which I'll get into in a minute, of how they bid out the policy. So they have this competition really, driving up the prices for the client. But when we were at 458, if you recall, Jim had spoken about the maximum you can make on a deal. Okay. We were already at that maximum, but Jordan said, wait. Jordan said, wait, give me a few days. We're going to, he wanted to get back to some of the, one or two of the bidders. He came back with a final offer of $488,000, which that last $30,000, nobody was getting a piece of except the seller of the policy. Okay. Needlessly to say, they were very, very happy, with this deal here. I saw the process, how it worked. I stayed involved. It was full transparency along of how this all worked out. And there was a very handsome, commission. So I said, okay, well, we're giving money instead of what I was doing my whole career, which I was doing. I was, involved in annuities and selling life insurance, et cetera, which still goes on. But this was kind of fascinating. Now I'm giving money to people. I'm discovering a hidden asset, which they never even knew sort of existed before, and certainly not at this level. Absolutely, not at this level here. So what I want to show here is, if we could pull up that first flyer with the flyer number 1. Okay. So with this flyer here, I developed, okay, and you can see it has my contact information on the bottom here, and this top part of it is that case, is that first case that we did, is the $488,000 case, and it explains what a life settlement is, and has different types of scenarios as well on there. So we put this out, and I send this out on my own email blast that I send out to my email list, as well as other ways that we hand it out as well. Very works very well. Works very well. The other scenario that I wanted to bring up here is, when, just for everyone to know out there, because these are questions I would have. So Jim had mentioned about having a conversation about compensation up front, okay, about how much compensation, how much is this going to cost the client if you're able to sell their policy? They're going to want to know, what does it cost me? Okay. So we get into that, and generally we charge a third, okay, for, like Jim was saying, $1 out of 3. But this is very important for the agents. On the disclosures, it has what Evergreen Life Settlements is making that third. So your arrangement as an agent is the arrangement that you have with Evergreen. So your client, what you wanted to disclose to them or not, that's up to you. They don't have knowledge of that 40% that you're making. That's not part of the disclosure here. Now you could tell them that, of course, that's up to you. And you don't have to tell them that. So that's part of it here. You don't have to feel like, oh, you're making all this money, and they I understand that the client might be trying to negotiate with you or whatever. So I just wanted to, clarify that as well. One of the flyers, will you pull up that second flyer for a second with the paddles on it? Great.
Hey, Bob.
Yeah.
So are you offering that first slide in terms of customization to the reps?
Yeah, I'm gonna get into all of that. Yes,
Okay.
sure. Right. I'm gonna get into all of that. Okay. So we're trying to pull up the second slide here. Okay. Okay, that's that one. Right. Very good. Okay. Oops, it doesn't seem to want to come up. Okay. So while we're trying to get it up, I'll describe it. What it is here is, and Jim, you had used this before, this one, but you used your version, which was the version. Thank you, Andreas. Which was your version of the one that was more, for the agents, which was speaking to agents. But this is client friendly, and the first one I showed you as well was client friendly. This is what sort of sums up what the difference is here from the people, from what you might see on TV for the ads, of people looking at of companies looking for life settlements. What Evergreen does is they have a bidding process, and they have buyers that they put these policies out to, that will be, which they go to bid. So they compete with one another. And that analogy of the real estate is what I use all the time. That's very simplistic. People will understand that if you have one potential buyer that wants to purchase your real estate, you're going to get one price. If you have 10, 15, 20 different buyers that are looking for your home, that price is going to be driven up. And that's what helps drive up the price here for these life settlements. The way I look at getting clients, okay, because there's a lot of ways, term conversion is good and GULs are good, and this. Do you have a client over 65 years of age? Do they have a policy, let's say $100,000, $200,000 minimum death benefit? Do they have any understanding or education about that they perhaps could sell their policies if they had a change of health along the way? Because my client, on the retired attorney, he took out his policy. He was a preferred, maybe even a super preferred. I don't recall, but at least preferred. Now he had some impairments. So it made the policy more valuable. But he's walking around, he's not, you don't have to be on death's door to sell a policy. That was a stigma that people thought about, for years perhaps. That's not the way it is. It helps drive up the price. If your health isn't the same, the older you are, the more money the client's going to get. But it doesn't have to be where they're incredibly sick, to take a look at this. And basically, the way I frame this is I say, if they ask them if they'd like a free appraisal, would you like to know what your policy's worth? And so many deals later with Evergreen here, I've become a general agent, for them. And I'm bringing agents like yourself to the table and maybe educating them so they have an awareness of what they could do as perhaps an add-on to their practice right now that they might have not thought of before. And the thing here is you're doing a service for the client, because in a lot of cases you're helping the retirement immensely. They could use this for long-term care. They could use this any way they want, the funds, and you're enlightening them to something that wasn't there before. So these two flyers, as well as I'm going to show you a brief video that we also have, and with a call to action page at the end. So if you would hang in there and just watch this.
Hey, Bob.
It's 3 minutes and 16 seconds. That would be great. Yes.
Let me just say one more thing. So when it comes to age and policies and health, right? Generally speaking, we're talking about seniors, but that doesn't mean that if you have a client that's under the age of 65, if they've had a significant health event, I can tell you, I've dealt with cases where they were in their 50s and they had an advanced cancer and they needed the income or the liquidity to pay to travel to actually participate in clinical trials that were in other states in the United States than where they lived. And so I think it's important to recognize that just because we're talking about seniors in the presentation, it can involve individuals that are younger if they have a significant enough health change in order to qualify for a settlement. That's all. Great point
there. So, but if you would indulge me and look at this video, and then stay for the full video, and then afterwards, I'm going to speak to you about how perhaps you can get these marketing tools, if you care to use for your client base, and your practice.
Three things every senior needs to know about life settlements. A life insurance policy is one of the most valuable assets a person can own. They're also one of the most misunderstood and wasted. People don't realize that a life insurance policy is personal property, just like their home, and that it has a life settlement value while they're still alive. Seniors in particular too often throw their policy away after making premium payments for years. The owner of a life insurance policy can sell their life policy through a life settlement for its higher market value, but are often unaware of the unique financial options designed specifically to benefit them while they're still alive. In fact, over 90% of seniors who lapse or surrender a policy say they would have considered a settlement if they had known about them. So, we'd like to answer the top 3 questions we see asked by people new to the secondary insurance market. 1. What is a life settlement? It's the legal right of every life insurance policy owner to be able to sell their policy, like any other asset, to a new owner who will take over the premium payments and then will collect the death benefit years later. 2. Who qualifies? Most often, a life settlement is for seniors over the age of 65 with a life insurance policy above $100,000 face value. The value of a life settlement is based on reverse underwriting, so the older and sicker a person is, the more they'll get from a life settlement. 3. So, how does a life settlement work? The process of a life settlement only takes about 60 to 90 days, and there are thousands of transactions completed every year. Policy owners tend to receive settlement values ranging between 10 to 50% of face value, with an industry average payout between 20 and 25%. There are approximately $4 billion of life settlements transacted every year. So now that we've answered some questions, let's look at what your life settlement options might be. Life settlements provide a number of different financial options to address the unique financial challenges of aging. A life settlement can provide a lump sum cash settlement with no restrictions on how the money is used. Or it can be used to fund long-term care on a tax-free basis. Or it can be used to maintain a reduced death benefit policy with no more premium payments. Or it can be used to fund an annuity to secure a guaranteed income stream for life. The important thing to know is that a life settlement is a much better solution than surrendering, or worse, letting a policy lapse. We hope this has been helpful information in determining if you are eligible for a life settlement. For more information or to receive a free policy review, please contact us.
Great, thank you, thank you. So you see here, we can leave this page on for a second. So this has a call to action that we developed we felt pretty consistent with the conservative nature of the video. Thank you for watching. I'm happy to answer your questions, and it has my contact information there, of course. So what we're putting out there for the NFI agents, okay, that care to come on board here and join us and speak with their clients, or even want to do a marketing situation for themselves here. If you could contact me, okay, we're gonna be able to develop something that will be able to supply you with this video, and we have a couple others coming out as well, and we're going to show you just a couple of seconds of those with the flyers as well as the videos, and we'd be able to put on your contact information on there. Now you could get a heads up on your clients, okay, prospective clients, and they'll have a little education before you bring them to us, that we could speak to them. So this is somewhat perhaps a little overwhelming at the beginning until you get to learn the roads here. So what we're doing for the NFI people is, for the first 2 deals that you bring us, you don't have to, you could do as little as you want or as much as you want in the deal. What I mean by that is, you could give me a name and number and say, let me know when I get paid, or you could stay on that every step of the way to learn, what it's about, and still you'll get paid the same amount. We're not going to take anything of the compensation, taking the deal from start to finish. And don't misunderstand this. Even if after the first 2 deals, we still will hold your hand everywhere along the way. So it's not going to be where you're going to be out on your own ever. But here, if I know some agents are very busy, they have their own practice. And I'm working with agents like that. They say, Bob, you handle it, and keep me updated or whatever. But here, this is what we're doing for NFI agents. The first 2 deals you bring to the table first, we will handle everything for you if you'd like. There's no requirement. We just need a name and contact information, or you could stay in it and be a part of it, everywhere along the way, as well. So we could just I want to show you what's going to be coming out soon, probably in the next few weeks. If we could bring up the animated videos for a second. So we're going to have animated videos like this. Of course, we're going to slow down the writing. It was way too fast. And they're going to be speaking it as well. We're getting this form now. This is going to be entertaining as well as very messaging as well. And this is going to be shorter in duration. This will probably be about 2 minutes, so people will be able to hang in there, and it'll put a smile on their face, and they'll say, okay, you know what, let's take a look at this. That's what we're moving, for here. So we're coming up with some, we think, creative marketing materials for people who are interested in this. And there are people that just might want to talk to their client or might have a case here and there. That's fine as well. But what I could tell you is I could vouch for the company of Evergreen. They're very solid. They do what they say they're going to do, and they walk the walk, talk the talk, walk the walk, however that goes. And look forward to doing business with you. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box, or feel free to call me direct. Amount of death benefits. So we touched on that a few times, but really, 100,000, Jim, would that be the minimum?
Yeah, I just responded to Tracy's question. She had asked, or he, I'm not sure, whether or not, like, what the face amount is, the minimum. And 100,000 really is the minimum. But if there's, in terms of focus, I would focus on 250,000 and up, simply because the cost of processing a $100,000 case is the same as a 250,000. And so, in order for it to be financially rewarding and suitable, we generally have to focus on policies that are a little bit bigger than 100. But I want to make it clear, if you have a client that's in a situation where they need your assistance and it's only 100,000, we should look at it. We want to help them if we can. We just don't want to be working only on $100,000 cases, because it's not really cost effective or efficient for us to do. That's all.
Just another point to that is when you're working on something that, let's say, isn't going to be a case. So what happens in the conversation is that these people of that age group especially will have friends, relatives, people they know who it might be a case for. So we're educating these people, we're enlightening them. So many people still don't know this is even possible to do. They say, really, you could do that? You could do that? I mean, it's because it had quite frankly, it had a negative stigma, 20 years ago. And it is now state regulated, because I do my research on these things. It's state regulated in over 90% of the states in the United States. So this is 100% regulated. There are a lot of documents to get signed. We'll get into all of that as far as, processing the case or whatever. But everything has a flow, to it in a system. But it's very, very above board. And, we just have to educate people who could be potential candidates to this. And that's what we're trying to do today.
It's important to note that, unlike new life insurance, we are not asking individuals to go through a medical exam or give blood or any of that. We are simply asking for a HIPAA release form and a list of their doctors, any practitioner that they may have seen, or any facility they may have visited in the last 5 years. And we will then go procure those medical records. So the underwriting is being done on what's actually in the file. Now, I will say that specifically with seniors, cognitive issues are very common. And if someone hasn't been to a neurologist or a doctor to have a cognitive test done, and they are having some cognitive issues, that type of testing will positively impact their case when it comes to selling their policy. Okay. So, this is not a situation where you're asking them to go through a medical exam or a blood test. We are simply underwriting based on the medical file that we can procure.
Yes. And like I said before, one thing leads to the next. That retired attorney whose case that I was describing before, last month we closed it. We closed the case for his wife's policy. So people like to get, if the reason for why they bought the policy is changed, whatever that is, business, or they bought it for the kids and they're also grown and successful now, or they bought it for, a spouse that might not be here. If that reason changed, and they have, even if they need the money for sure, but even if they don't need the money to live on, it won't affect their lifestyle. It's still an asset that they don't know they have, that they might not need to leave that death benefit anymore. And you could also do things like, if it's a large enough policy, you could maybe sell half, keep half. There are things that could be worked out here if people have a desire to look into this. Great, good. So if you're interested in any of this, and you're interested in any of the marketing materials that might be of help to you, you're interested in our working side by side, please call. If we could put up the contact information again for me, that would be great. Okay. So you have my email, you have my phone number. So there you go. Thanks for joining us today. I think that's a wrap, Jim. What do you think?
Yeah, just one other question that was asked about how does it work with term insurance, and I responded, but it is worth noting. So in most of the term cases, the policy will be convertible to a permanent product, right? Unless the insured is really impaired. And so in those situations, the policy is actually converted prior to the sale and then sold. And so what typically happens is the policy owner either pays the minimum quarterly premium in order to convert, and is reimbursed those dollars in the settlement, meaning at the time of closing, or in some situations, the buyer will advance the premium. And so it's not uncommon that the seniors on fixed income, and they don't have the wherewithal to front the conversion premium. And so in those situations, buyers will generally agree to quote unquote advance the premium to the policy owner for them to then pay for the conversion. And that's how it works. Pretty straightforward.
Right. So a couple other questions came in. This only works for permanent policies, right? That was the question, and you just answered that. It doesn't. It works for all policies. And what are different kinds of policies to look for? Again, you could look for any type of life insurance policy.
The most attractive are guaranteed universal life, or GUL, right? They're the most attractive policy design. But I would say second in line will be universal life. So non-guaranteed universal life policies. Outside of that, any policy can be sold. It really is a function of the cost of maintaining that policy over the life expectancy curve of the insured. And so even if somebody was rated at issue, a table B or a table C, if they had underlying health issues at the time of issue, and those health issues have progressed and they're less healthy today, well, that contract can be sold even though it's a rated policy. But most of the time, it's someone who was in decent health when they bought a policy, and they're not in as good a health today, and that's where the value is being created.
Right. But in saying that too, if you have someone who's interested, you should let the people who can figure it out, if there is a way to go with this. At the agent level right now, if you have someone interested, just turn them over to us, and then we'll be able to figure it out and see if there's a way to go with this right now. So want to take a lot of the thinking part of it out of it, and just, if you have clients that are interested or whatever, we can get going with that, and then you'll learn along the way what really, this is better. Oh, they were impaired when we took it out, so then we can't sell it. Well, yes, you can, because maybe they're much more impaired today. So that's the route.
Bob, in closing, we only have a minute left here. I just wanted to say that the approach to the client that works the best is asset valuation, right? You're going to your clients and you're saying, listen, Mrs. Smith, you're 75 years old and you have a life insurance policy. You don't know what it's worth. There's no way to put a value on it without going through a policy appraisal. And that's essentially what we're doing. We're putting a fair market value on that asset for that person. And now, we're not in the business of just doing this for free when there's no interest in selling. You want to have some idea that the client may be interested in exiting this contract, so we're not just going through this exercise of futility. But having said that, it doesn't cost them anything. And so if the client says, yes, I'd be interested, then by all means, we should take the next step and figure out what the value of that policy is, which means having them complete an application, securing a current illustration or a conversion illustration, if it's term insurance, conversion from term to permanent, and allow us to do our work, right? Which is actually place the value on that asset for that client. And then they can make an educated decision on whether or not they want to keep it or sell it. With that, I just want to say thank you to everybody. Thank you, Bob, for joining me today. And thank you to NFI Solutions and Selena and the entire team there for assisting us today. If there's anything we can do for you, you have our contact information, and we look forward to speaking with you in the near future.
Have a great afternoon, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.